As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized CIMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a CIMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the CIMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the CIMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, professional colleagues, students and friends of the Institute, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to another exciting episode of ICAN on AIR, today, Thursday, 27th October 2022, proudly brought to you by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. I'm your host, Olamide Balogun, FCA. I'd like to sincerely appreciate our viewers for taking out the time to join us every Tuesdays and Thursdays between the hours of 6 p.m. and 7 p.m., where we take a look at topical issues affecting our profession, our country, Nigeria, and indeed the world at large. On today's episode, we will be taking a close look at the topic, IPSAS Accounting, the journey so far. And our guest is indeed in the house, is an erudite scholar, a professor of accounting and finance, in the person of Professor Sulaiman A.S. Arua. He's fully on ground to do justice to the topic of discourse today. Let me quickly go through his CV. Professor Sulaiman A.S. Arua is a professor of accounting and finance at Nasarawa State University, Kefi. He has spent over 22 years in teaching, research, and offering national and international consultancy services on public financial management, governance, and reforms. He serves on the Governing Council of Association of National Accountants of Nigeria, Nasarawa State University. He is also a board member of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, amongst many other things. He's a fellow of the Association of National Accountants of Nigeria, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, to name a few. He has a great deal of experience on IPSAS implementation, and as a member of the 7-man stakeholders committee on the adoption of IFRS and IPSAS, he was able to garner enough knowledge to come on board and discuss this very topic for us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit back and while I go on this brief commercial break, and I'll return with our guests and we'll dive into the topic proper. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back, viewers, and thank you so much for being on. Once again, I'd like to thank you for taking out the time to join us. Professor, you're welcome on board, sir. Thank you for being here on ICAN on Air this Thursday episode.
Thank you very much, Balogun, and our very distinguished audience. It's my pleasure to be on this program.
Yes, it's set to be a wonderful edition, and I'll just go straight into it, Professor, by saying that IPSAS and the knowledge that comes with it is very important to professional accountants and accounting students across the globe. Our global audience would be glad to learn and share the rudiments of this all-important subjects. From your words of knowledge, Professor, please could you help explain what we mean by IPSAS? What does IPSAS stand for, sir?
Thank you very much. The discussion today is about IPSAS accounting and the journey so far. And it's so important that we understand what IPSAS means. IPSAS are a set of accounting standards issued by the IPSAS board, and that's applied in the public sector environment around the world for the preparation of the general purpose financial statements. And they hold very impressive benefits for countries that adopt. Particularly, we talk about they improve the quality of reporting within the public sector environment in terms of accounting for fully the cost of goods and services and the economic resources and claims against them, that's as long as it concerns government. They increase the level of transparency. They bring about improved decision-making based on the information content of general purpose financial statements that are based on IPSAS. And we have also seen that they are associated with inflow of foreign direct investments in the environments in which they have been adopted. And I think fundamentally, IPSAS are those standards that we professional accountants use, apply to the public sector environment to prepare general purpose financial statements.
Very well said, Professor. General purpose statements, the standards that are applied in preparing the general purpose statements for accountants in the public sector. Thank you very much, Professor. Moving swiftly, our global viewers also like to know if you could please run us through the purpose and components of IPSAS.
Now, the IPSAS generally are 43 standards that have been issued so far by the International Public Sector Accounting Standards. The first was IPSAS 1 on presentation of financial statements, which was issued in May 2000 and revised in December 2006. And the latest, of course, is IPSAS 43 on leases, which was issued in January 2022. So you can see that a span period of between 2000 and 2022, they have been able to roll out 43 IPSAS, and they have also rolled out a lot of guidance material as well as a conceptual framework.
Very well said, sir. Very well said. Well, so our global viewers, as we always say, there's always an opportunity for you to type in your questions as the show will be picking those questions and posing them to our guests who will definitely do justice to these questions. So as you rightly said, Professor, 43 standards have been issued so far, and IPSAS are this general standard in public sector accounts. Sir, we'd also like to, moving further, what is the major difference between IPSAS and FIRS? Because we hear people talk about FIRS, and we also hear them talk about IPSAS. Are there major differences?
Yes, because of the unique characteristics of the public sector environment, of course, there are bound to be unique differences. But the fundamental rule guiding the design of issuance of a IPSAS standard is that they reflect fully the IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, to the extent that they have similar characteristics. But where they differ, definitely, they will have to modify IFRS to reflect such peculiarities of the public sector environment. So the IFRS deals with the private sector environment, and IPSAS deals with the public sector environment, the peculiarities that are there.
Thank you very much, Professor. Moving back a bit, you mentioned 3 standards so far issued on IPSAS. Are there any unique, or should I say uniqueness to any one of them that you probably want to highlight for our viewers to digest?
Yes, in terms of structure of reports that we expect, definitely the reports you get from the general purpose financial statements are different and unique to the sector compared to what we expect in the public sector environment. And of course, when you also want to account for revenue, they also differ in terms of exchange or exchange revenue. For the public sector, they differ from the private sector. Like I said earlier, there is no doubt that there are peculiarities with public sector, and to the extent of accounting for assets, for property, non-current assets, and other issues associated with public sector, those peculiarities have been dealt with by IPSAS, and these are specifics that we note when we are accounting for elements of financial statements in the public sector.
Very well said, sir. Once again, we'd like to thank all of you who are connected all over the world for taking out the time to join us on this Thursday episode of ICAN on Air. And you can send in your questions, and as the time goes on, we'll be selecting some of them and posting them to our guests. Prof, also, I'm sure our viewers also like to know when IPSAS was actually first adopted in Nigeria, and based on your assessment, what would you say is the level of penetration and acceptance in Nigeria today?
Yes, you see, discussing the IPSAS journey, I would like to classify it into 3 eras. And the first era is a pre-IPSAS adoption era, which I would say pre-colonial period up to 2009. Then I also want to talk about the IPSAS adoption era, which I will put between 2010 up to 2016. And then, of course, I will give the post-IPSAS adoption era, which is, I will also classify as 2011 to date. Now, let's take from the global perspective. The information at hand is that we have about 17 countries that are fully adopted. There are 40 that have partially adopted, and there are 15 non-adopting countries. But of all, Nigeria is among those who have partially adopted in Africa, and Tanzania is reported to have implemented fully in 2013. Now, in 2018, by the IPSAS B report, they put it that 25% of governments across the world reported on accrual, including Nigeria, and 45% were cash transiting, and 30% were on full cash IPSAS. But the most recent report from IFAC-CFA Public Sector Accountability Index is that 65% of countries will report on accrual, and 17.5% are still cash transiting, and also another 17.5% will be on full cash basis. You can see that tremendous progress has been made as far as adoption is concerned. Now, let me come down to the pre-IPSAS era for Nigeria. If you are a keen follower of public sector environment, it's an environment that was fragmented in terms of financial reporting. We were basically focused on how much we receive and reporting how we have spent it. And it's as easy as that. Documents were, the information were incomplete, and government decision making could not be supported by the records that we keep. And because of that, in fact, in that period, pre-adoption, the World Bank did a gap analysis on federal government of Nigeria financial reporting. And it revealed a lot of gaps that needed to be filled. We also had the major work that was done by the Nigerian Accounting Standards Board that put the 17-man stakeholder committee to study the feasibility of adopting IFRS and IPSAS. And that committee was sponsored by the World Bank, and they did a great work and submitted their report in January 1999 to the Minister of Trade and Investments. And that report brought out very clearly that we had no option, but we had to adopt both standards fully as issued by the International Accounting Standards Board and IPSAS B. Now, that decision led to presentation of the report to the Federal Executive Council, specifically July 2010, when government fully adopted the report. But the report is available, I'm sure, on the website of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria now. And that is the foundation to IPSAS adoption in Nigeria. Now, from the adoption era, a lot of activities have happened towards full implementation of IPSAS in Nigeria. Number one was that the FEC approval gave the needed political will to adopt and implement IPSAS in Nigeria. Number two, the Nigerian Accounting Standards Board report recommended some roadmap to be taken for implementation of IFRS, and also establishment of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, which the Act also came in 2011, and that council was established, replacing the defunct Nigerian Accounting Standards Board, and of course the Act was repealed. Now, if you look at the Act, it gave the sole power and authority to the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria to issue, adopt IFRS, and also IPSAS. And to the extent that they open directorates responsible for these two standards at the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. I think what they failed to do was that whereas there's a roadmap for IFRS, there was no roadmap for IPSAS in that committee report. But again, the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation stepped in and did what we call IPSAS gap analysis during the adoption period. And at that particular point, we also witnessed that the government of Nigeria, through the instrumentality of Federation Account Allocation Committee, took interests in the implementation, and they set up a technical committee to implement IPSAS in Nigeria. And that committee comprises the accountants general at the federal, states, and the local government. And so till date, this has been the committee that has been midwifing the implementation of IPSAS in Nigeria. So fundamentally, you see that the passage of Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria Act and the setting of this technical committee, and the committee also coming out with a roadmap to implement IPSAS, had tremendously helped to achieve a number of milestones to date. But I also need to quickly say that the roadmap gave us very clearly that by 2014, IPSAS cash should be adopted. And by 2016, we should migrate to IPSAS accrual. And that is where we are today. Now, for me, I'm interested in what happened post-adoption. And that is where your question likely will fall in. You see, there are
Yes.
some clear challenges and implementation pathway that the report of the NSB had put forward that guided the implementation of the International Financial Reporting Standards. And today, you agree with me that IFRS has been fully adopted, and the quality of financial reporting in the private sector cannot be compared to the public sector environment. There was need for stakeholder engagement. We didn't have that much as expected with IPSAS. You need to convince actors in the sector, in the environment, that the cash basis we're doing before was wrong and we needed to transit to IPSAS. People were not convinced, and up to this moment, people are not aware. They are not, there's no inclusion in terms of implementation of this. We also observed in that report, which I was a member, that there were some structural and legal transformation that were needed. Up to this moment, I can only remember that the Companies Act is the only one that has received attention. Many of the laws, Finance Control Management Act, 1956, the financial regulations and others are still not reflecting IPSAS as a standard that is in use in the public sector in Nigeria. We also saw that having the kind of bureaucracy, the ministry department agencies we have in Nigeria, we might not be able to succeed with IPSAS. There was also recommendation for some level of transformation and change management, which up to now we have not witnessed in the public sector environment. Again, you will agree that we have more professionals in the private sector entities than the government. There was need for skills capacity building, knowledge building, and professionalization of the public sector. In preparation for this adoption, you can say it's a far cry from what is expected for us to implement IPSAS fully. We took cognizance that there's going to be an enormous cost to bear, and that this funding must come from government, must also come from international partners, international donors. Till date, I think the only funding I know comes for IPSAS implementation is that comes like a grant from FAC to their FAC subcommittee, technical committee, which is not sufficient. And I think largely they have been using that to build capacity than any other thing that is required to implement. Then you see that the issue of technology, issue of infrastructure are key to implementation of IPSAS that we have not seen up to this moment. So for me, there are milestones that we have achieved. There's no doubt about it. We have seen a lot of publications, a lot of training, a lot of attempts to bring to bear the impact of IPSAS on the environment. But I don't think we are there yet. And we've seen a lot of publications like National Chart of Accounts, the General Purpose Financial Statement, IPSAS Accrual, IPSAS Cash. We have seen things like Users Manual, and many other publications that they have done, and accounting policies to support IPSAS Accrual and Cash. These things are commendable, but I think they have not sufficiently helped us to bring the implementation, the journey to the destination that we want.
Wow, Prof. I mean, that was indeed a detailed analysis of supposed to you. You took us through the pre-implementation and now even post there, and it's really, really refreshing to hear you speak. And I'm sure our global viewers are also, taking notes and really getting diving into this topic as we move ahead. Let me quickly support the question I asked earlier with this particular one, Prof. When discussing accounting basis, practical examples help us understand things better. Based on your wealth of knowledge and experience on this subject, please could you educate us on the difference between the cash basis and the accrual basis of accounts, and how IPSAS has impacted on these concepts?
Generally, we used to talk about extreme basis and intermediate basis. When you talk about extreme basis, you are talking about cash basis, accrual basis. In between, you can have modified cash, you can have modified accrual basis. But fundamentally, I take example Nigeria when we're on cash basis and we translate to IPSAS cash. Generally, we were recognizing actual cash received, actual payments, and in keeping that account, you see that the final accounts were not recognizing non-current assets. A lot of things were understated liabilities, and we were not having full costs, a report of cost of goods and services as far as the financial reports were concerned. But if you come to accrual, the moment there's an exchange, service has been enjoyed, you must recognize the accrued component. And at the end of the day, you see elements of account in terms of assets, in terms of revenue, carrying full cost of goods and services. And that is why the way to go is to go accrual, because the private sector have been enjoying that. And government needs that to support their level of decisions that they make in that environment. So definitely, we are talking about when do we recognize when money is being received, when it is paid, when we measure them, and going to disclosure and their presentation. So these bases of accounting are key to determining these issues conceptually.
Very well said, sir. Very well said. And basically, I guess the advance or the accrual basis. Prof?
Please repeat your question. Your voice is breaking.
Okay, Prof, can you hear me clearly now?
Yes.
Yes, I was asking that a follow-up to that question would be if you could help shed more light on the advantages and disadvantages associated with the cash basis and the accrual basis.
No, basically, like I've told you, is that even in the earlier discussion, I've said it. Number one, if you talk about transparency, accountability is associated with accrual basis. And if you also come to talk about completeness of record, you can find it with accrual basis. But if you talk about simplicity in accounting, you can go with cash basis. And you can see that many developing countries are still on cash basis because of its simplicity. And they can easily account for the revenues they have and what they have spent without the rigidity of judgment of recognizing the accrual components of it. So I've said, in terms of advantage, accrual basis is more advantageous. It gives us a better quality report. It gives us more transparent account of fiscal operations of the entity. And that is where the entire countries ought to go, and that's where they are going.
All right, very good. Thank you, Prof. Well, to our global viewers, I'm sure you've been having a wonderful session, as I've been having that too. Would advise our viewers to please send in their questions, and as we'll take them as the show goes on. Okay, so Prof, let's get into classroom and let's deep dive into this. Is it possible to convert from the cash to accrual accounting and vice versa? And if yes, and if not?
Your question is cutting. If I attempt to answer what I heard, it might not be complete. Well,
okay, let me take that again, sir, so you can hear. Okay. I was asking if it's possible to convert from the cash to accrual basis or vice versa.
Yes, it's possible. And that is why the transition procedure is going. It's very possible. If you want to have your elements of account based on a cash, you can. It's about doing away with the accrual components. If you want to deal with convert from cash to accrual, yes, you need to recognize them. But like the difficulty we're having in transiting from IPSAS cash to accrual is about the legacy assets, the valuations. Those non-current assets we don't use to recognize. We need to recognize them under accrual. And I think that is the real difficulty that we're having. So it's possible. You see, accounting is about recognition of when an event has taken place, measuring it, disclosing and presentation. Now, all these are guided by principles. So if you provide an account and the details to convert from accrual to cash, of course you can. But that will be easier than cash to accrual because of the added information you require to present accrual reports. Of course, it's possible. That is why the transition is there.
Okay. All right. Good. Once again, we'd like to appreciate all our viewers who are globally connected, and to actually sound as a caution to all our members who are in the chat room. I'm sending in their questions. Please do not click on any link by anyone posting any link. The authentic link will be posted by ICAN. Don't click on any other link requesting you to do so. We need to be vigilant at these times. Moving swiftly, Prof, I would like to also ask this, that based on your wealth of knowledge and practical experience on this subject, what can you say are the general challenges of IPSAS and the unique challenges associated with its implementation in Nigeria as at today?
Now, the key challenges, one, when we adopted IPSAS Cash 2014, we had hardly learned the rudiments. Then we quickly transited to IPSAS Accrual 2016. To me, that journey was too swift, and that left a number of agencies, states and local governments behind. And because they cannot catch up, they are still backward, and they have not even started. A lot have not started. So if I score the level of implementation today, it might not be more than 10%. Even in the federal government level, there are very few agencies that have adopted. So there is weak implementation. Number two, the intent is full adoption for the three levels of government. There seems to be narrowed implementation of IPSAS at federal level and selected agencies. There is a problem of knowledge and IPSAS skills gap. As I'm telling you, the professional bodies haven't done significantly to equip members with IPSAS skills and knowledge as they have done with IFRS. And if you also pick the higher education institutions, they are yet to even change curriculum to reflect the current reporting regime, IPSAS. And public sector accounting is still being taught as just a semester course in the higher education institutions. It's a challenge. I'm expecting these people to graduate to come to the public sector and perform these functions. Then I also have a problem. You see, the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, by law, FRC Act 2011, is the sole institution that has regulatory power for adoption, oversight, and monitoring of compliance of this IPSAS implementation. They are out of the show. It is FAC subcommittee that is in charge with the Office of the Accountant General. It's a challenge. It's a problem. If we don't see FRC as a driver, then how do we drive to the destination? They drove the IFRS significantly well, and we landed well, ahead of many other countries. That is the kind of impact we want to see in IPSAS that we are not seeing. If they are lacking capacity, if they are lacking funding, they should get this, they should fix this and address that. I also have a problem with IPSAS information system platform. You cannot implement IPSAS like we had cash basis pre-IPSAS. We need information system platform that can drive the transaction processing, reporting. We have GIFMIS. We have the technological platform in government. What is wrong? Adopting a system that can help put us on accounting information system platform to drive this system quicker than we want. Then there are also transitional challenges with legacy assets and valuation. You can imagine that we were not recognizing fixed assets before, non-current assets before. Now we have to recognize it. What value are we going to add to give to these legacy assets? I think the guidelines just came out last year, and so we're still struggling to put value to these legacy assets. There are problems with multiplicity of public financial authorities, legislations that are in conflict with adoption of IPSAS. But I also note that the FRC Act is very clear that we have adopted, and whenever they pronounce, the adoption is total. So it overrides those legislation that conflict, but we need to revise this legislation to come into conformity with IPSAS adoption and implementation. And a number of these authorities are also outdated. You can imagine me saying Finance Control and Management Act 1956. You can hear about Audit Act 1958. They predate our independence. They need to be revised. Today, we need a Public Financial Management Act that will galvanize the content of this thing to support IPSAS implementation. Your Financial Regulations 2009 is yet to reflect IPSAS implementation. It's Treasury circulars that we are using to enforce implementation of IPSAS. We need to quickly move beyond that. I also want to challenge professional accountancy organizations. ICAN on AIR. They need to do more in professional skill building, capacity building in IPSAS. We have done so well in IFRS, but professionalization of the public sector is still a problem. And unfortunately, we have recognized professionals in the lower cadre now in the public sector. And that is a challenge, because this is the time we need people to build their skills, their knowledge on IPSAS, and become professionals that will drive this implementation process. This challenge things. And I think finally, I think FRC should sit up, build this capacity, seek for the funds, and fund IPSAS implementation like it did for IFRS.
Very well said. Very well said, Professor. It's been a very enlightened show thus far, and all our viewers, I'm sure, are getting the value for the time being put in. We'll go a quick break so we can catch our breath a bit, and we'll be right back. Please stay tuned.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. That was a rather quick one on our break schedule. I will also would like to use the opportunity to remind all our viewers that you can take an advantage of this wonderful opportunity to place your adverts for your goods and services, as we are globally viewed all over the world. It's a very good platform for you to come and place your goods and services, and you'll be getting a quantum leap for doing so. Prof, once again, say a big thank you for taking out the time to really deep dive into this topic. Indeed, your name is Professor, from the initials, it's SAS Arua. So all I need to do is just put your name, and I have Professor IPSAS Arua. You've been really doing deep analysis into this, and I really appreciate you. Moving swiftly, I also like to proceed by asking you this, sir. As a Nigerian professional accountant, please, could you give us your objective assessment of the graphs and practical application of IPSAS by the Nigerian professional accountants generally?
Okay, number one, there was an evaluation study that was done by Fact Technical Subcommittee. I think the report is yet to be out, but we also have done, in the academics, we have done a lot of assessments. The skill gap is significant. You see, Balogun, if I tell you, we have concentrated so much on private sector accounting that we have abdicated our responsibility in the public sector environment. It's highly underdeveloped. Our professionals don't know anything. Even our auditors, they find difficulty in auditing public sector environments. So for me, it's a major challenge for professional accountancy organizations. We have very weak knowledge of that environment, and we need to do more to learn more of it. I think the knowledge is improving, because if you see the difference between the IFRS and IPSAS conceptual framework is minor. So some are now, from their knowledge of IFRS, trying to understand the public sector environment. But I think there's a lot to be done. It's not satisfactory. That's my assessment.
Thank you. Well said. When we talk about the public sector, the very first thing that comes to mind of majority of the people is corruption. And so one will wonder, with your wealth of experience, sir, could you x-ray, or would you give an opinion as to how IPSAS has helped to curb corruption in the public sector, say, over the last 10 years?
Yes. You see, I wish we can get to full adoption of IPSAS. It will help a lot. Let's say you are accounting for a property. Before, we used to say the price on the receipts is the cost of the property, and that is the cost you capture. But today, there are other costs associated with the property to bring the property to use, which you have to account for. So even the ability to account for full cost of goods and services is curbing corruption. You could see a generator bought for 5 million naira. To put that generator to use, there are expenses you have to incur to bring to that. That we were not reporting before, along with the cost of the goods. But today we have to do that under IPSAS. And that we are now bound to use measurements to bring the actual cost of these goods and services. I think it will help very well for government to also report fully. Number two, you agree with me, we spend a lot on fixed assets, not current assets. And we're not reporting them. Today they are needed. So that again makes us to account for these things. Imagine that we're seeing non-current assets are expired costs. And if you are not accounting, they are not in your record, they are stolen. And and they may just remain in your fixed asset register. So I think that is helping a lot. Another angle I have looked at this matter is that the level of transparency, judgment, accountability that goes with IPSAS is sufficient to curb the level of corruption in the public sector environment.
Very well said, Prof. Very well said. Another question that would swiftly come to mind is, in implementing and adopting IPSAS, do we really need funds for it?
Yes. You see, let me tell you from my experience. As a member of the Nigerian Accounting Standards Board committee then, it was funded by the World Bank. Without that fund, you wouldn't have been able to do that work swiftly and produce report in 2009. And in that report, we recognize that there's enormous cost that will come. Or the question rhetorically I will ask you, didn't the listed entities expend a lot of costs to adopt IFRS? They did. The MDAs will have to do from human capacity building, from information system infrastructure, transformation of the ministries, departments to implement. And these costs should come from the budget, should also come from donors. But to rely on FAC for funding is not sustainable. And that's where I'm sure IFRS will have done a good, Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria will have done a very good work if they have the fund. They will have built their capacity and they will have funded the implementation, training and everything. But today, I'm sure they are not going there because they are self-funding and the funds are not there to expend on IPSAS. Government should provide these funds. After all, the private sector entities, they contributed to fund IFRS implementation in Nigeria. And this I'm very much aware.
All right. Very well said, Prof. I mean, I know you are pro, IPSAS, you want the public sector to work well, and truth be said, if the public sector works well, it's the benefit of everyone in the economy. And so we need to ensure these things are implemented. Yes. Maybe we might probably have to disagree a bit. I would like to ask this. The present Nigerian government introduced the TSA in a bid to curb corruption. In your own opinion, how far has this step helped in curbing corruption in the public sector?
You see, the Treasury Single Account is a welcome one. You can better appreciate it if you see that to a great extent, it has reduced the leakages that used to exist. If I give you an example, you have a university that was collecting the tuition, everything, and yet was being funded. You had WAEC, you had JAM that were collecting, selling their forms, spending the money, and they were being funded. Today, there's almost 90% remittance of these revenue generating agencies to government. So from the revenue perspective, we can give kudos to TSA. But for the expenditure component of TSA, disbursement, I don't think we have done much. The leakages are still there. But frankly, TSA came timely and it has curbed corruption significantly from the revenue aspect.
Okay. All right. Very well said, Prof. Speaking for members in your jurisdiction, being that you're in the academia, one of the offshoots of the TSA is the adoption and implementation of the IPPIS, which I'm aware that ASU has been having a problem with it. Being a member of the academics, can you weigh in on this matter?
Yes, me, I'm very clear about the matter. ASU is correct to say there are peculiarities in the academics that IPS is not having, but that does not suffice to say they should develop one for government to use. Make your case. Government can modify the IPs to reflect these peculiarities. After all, the doctors have peculiarities. They are being paid. They are called allowances. So what is the big deal? Making your case and government capturing this in the next stage of configuration of IPs. So for me, any person that is kicking against adoption of technology, integrated personnel payroll system to run payrolling, that person is not of age, is not technology ready. We need it, and it has curbed corruption, and we need it to curb corruption. So we want to say that academics and others that are protesting should come to terms that we have the best of system that is still developing, and it can capture their peculiarities as time goes on. So I think IPS is also one of the very good public financial management reforms that I give kudos to.
Prof, honestly, I cannot thank you enough. It's been an enlightening session sitting down with you, and your wealth of knowledge and experience is something we'll definitely need to tap from occasionally as time goes on. And I know that hopefully by the time we call on you again, we'll create a time for us to come on ICAN here. In closing, Prof, ICAN is always open to ideas that will positively advance the growth of our members and the accounting profession in Nigeria. What would you? What are your general advice or your closing thoughts as to what ICAN can do to improve IPSAS and its general implementation in Nigeria?
Well, my number one, the journey of IPSAS accounting in Nigeria has been remarkable, but yet not impactful. A lot of milestones have been made, singularly by the FAC subcommittee. I want to see more attention being paid to public sector by professional accountancy organization, ICAN can do better than what it is doing currently in terms of public sector environment. You see, let me tell you, the collaboration between the professional accountancy organization and academic, the gap is still wide. We need the town and gown and the professionals practice to come and address accounting matter. We have done very well in private sector accounting, but we are behind, far apart when it comes to public sector accounting. So for me, let us all partake, work with the academia in developing curriculum for this area, public sector accounting. Let us work in building the capacity that we need for this area. Let us stand against the bureaucracy that is not encouraging professionalism in the public sector accounting practice. Let us recognize our members that are in public sector and give them special attention in terms of training, in terms of continuous development programs, so that they can better understand the environment and bring our public sector environment to the standard that we're witnessing in the private sector. And finally, I want to say that we need every stakeholder, like ICAN and the regulators, FRC, to come together and the Office of the Accountant General to draw a new roadmap that will help completely and fully implement IPSAS in Nigeria.
Professor Sulaiman A.S. Arua, it's been a pleasure having you on ICAN on Air today. Thank you so much for doing justice to the topic, IPSAS Accounting, the journey so far. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you very much, Balogun. Thank you very much, distinguished audience. My pleasure.
Yes, sir. And to our global viewers and our audience, we say thank you for also creating the time to be with us today. A few announcements before we call this a date. The fellowship conferment is on, and kindly visit the ICAN portal to register. Also, the 21st World Congress of Accountants in Mumbai, India, will be coming up between the 18th to 21st of November this year. Let's all ensure we galvanize ourselves and attend massively. On behalf of the producer and my editorial team, I'd like to say thank you for tuning in, and see you next week Tuesday for another exciting episode. For now, I say bye for now.